Hello everyone, and welcome back to the channel. Today, we're diving into a story that sounds like something out of a movie, but it's a chilling reality that shook a quiet little town in Maine, USA. On July 20th, 2010, a frantic call was made to 911. On the other end of the line, a trembling male voice said, I did something terrible. I don't think she's alive." That man was Dennis Edgecomb, and the woman he was talking about was his girlfriend, 42-year-old Pamela Green, a mother of two. What makes this tragedy even more haunting is that just minutes before her death, Pamela managed to send her daughter one final text message. "He's threatening to kill me right now, call and you can hear it." A chilling prophecy of her own death. And sadly, it came true. In today's video, we'll unravel the case of Dennis Edgecomb, not just to recount how a relationship spiraled into murder, but to confront a bigger question: why were such clear warning signs ignored, and why did a woman have to pay with her life? Part 1, A Quiet Town and a Troubled Love Story. Morrill, Maine. A small rural town with just over 1,000 residents, where people often leave their doors unlocked, where neighbors wave to each other from across the street, and where violent crime is almost unheard of. On the surface, it was the perfect picture of peace. But inside one modest home, behind closed doors, a storm was quietly brewing. Pamela Green, 42 years old, was known by her friends as warm, caring, and independent. A mother who had raised her children with strength, and someone who had rebuilt her life after past hardships. By all accounts, Pamela was looking for companionship, a sense of stability, and maybe even a second chance at happiness. Enter Dennis Edgecomb, 3 years younger than Pamela. To the outside world, he seemed like an ordinary man, someone who could make people laugh, someone who could fit into the quiet rhythm of small-town life. But those who were closest to Pamela had heard a different story. Arguments. Tension. A controlling streak that Dennis sometimes couldn't hide. At first, their relationship appeared functional. They lived together, shared daily routines, and to neighbors they looked like any other couple. But underneath, things were breaking down. Friends later recalled that Pamela often confided her unease. She admitted that Dennis could be jealous, sometimes unpredictable, and above all, she feared what he might do if pushed too far. And then came the chilling proof of that fear. On the morning of July 20th, 2010, just before noon, Pamela typed a desperate message to her daughter. "He's threatening to kill me right now. Call and you can hear it." Imagine receiving a text like that from your mother. Imagine the wave of panic, the helplessness, the sinking realization that danger is already in the room. Pamela's words weren't just a warning. They were almost prophetic, her last attempt to reach out before everything spiraled out of control. Meanwhile, inside the house, the argument escalated. Dennis later told investigators that Pamela confronted him after discovering that he planned to leave her house. According to his version, she became angry, even attacked him first. Whether that was the truth or simply an excuse, we may never know. What we do know is that the atmosphere inside those walls turned from tense to deadly in a matter of minutes. Picture this scene for a moment. Two people, locked in a heated fight. Pamela's voice, sharp, emotional, perhaps breaking with fear, saying, "Pamela, so that's it? You're just walking out on me." "Dennis, I can't do this anymore, Pam. You don't understand. You push me too far." Neighbors would later say they hadn't heard screams or loud commotion, but in that house, words cut deep. And sometimes, words weren't enough. It's important to pause here and reflect. Many abusive relationships don't look abusive to outsiders. From the street, from social gatherings, everything might seem normal. But abuse often festers in private, shielded by closed doors and silenced by fear or denial. Pamela's text shows us something vital. She recognized the threat, but she was trapped in that very moment, unable to escape. The tragedy is that she had already sounded the alarm. Yet fate gave her no time for rescue. And with that, the stage was set for a crime that would leave this quiet town forever changed. Part 2, The Warning Signs and the Breaking Point. By the morning of July 20th, 2010, Pamela Green already sensed the danger that was looming inside her own home. The night before, she had confided to her daughter that Dennis's temper had been flaring more than usual. But it was that final text, sent just before noon, that truly captured her fear. "He's threatening to kill me right now. Call and you can hear it." This message wasn't ambiguous. It wasn't vague. It was a direct cry for help, a last line written by a woman who felt the walls closing in on her. Pamela had been with Dennis long enough to know his moods. He could be quiet, withdrawn, and then suddenly explosive. Friends later revealed that Pamela had often expressed feeling on edge around him, as though she was constantly walking on eggshells, never sure what might trigger his anger. And that morning, the trigger was set off by something Dennis himself admitted: he planned to leave Pamela's home. On paper, it sounds simple, someone deciding to move out. But in the dynamics of a troubled relationship, that decision is rarely clean. For Pamela, it might have felt like betrayal. For Dennis, it might have felt like rejection. Both emotions, hurt and anger, collided in that small house in Morrill, and the result was deadly. Let's picture the scene. Pamela stands in the living room, her phone still in her hand, her voice sharp but tinged with fear. Pamela, frustrated, near tears. "So that's it? After everything? You just pack up and walk out?" Dennis, defensive, voice rising. "You don't get it, Pam. You don't understand how hard this has been for me." Pamela, "For you? You're threatening me, Dennis. This isn't love, this is control." Neighbors would later say they didn't hear anything unusual that morning, no screams loud enough to carry across the street. That's often how domestic violence works. It happens in silence, hidden from the outside world, contained within walls that mask the terror inside. Dennis would later claim that Pamela came at him first, that she struck him in anger. Whether that's true or not, it doesn't change what came next. Because what happened next wasn't defense. It wasn't self-protection. It was escalation. He shoved Pamela back onto the couch. The force stunned her, knocking the wind from her lungs. Struggling to sit up, Pamela looked at him with disbelief and warned. Pamela, gasping, "That's going to leave a mark." Those simple words carried weight. They weren't just about a bruise. They were a reminder, maybe even a warning, that violence leaves scars, both visible and invisible. But instead of pulling back, Dennis went further. Here's what we know from psychology: abusers often reach a breaking point when they feel control slipping away. To Dennis, the thought of Pamela rejecting him, calling out his threats, or even exposing him to her family, may have triggered an overwhelming need to reassert dominance. And in that instant, he chose the most violent method possible: his hands around her throat. Let's slow down here. Strangulation is not quick. It is intimate, brutal, and deliberate. Unlike a weapon, which can create distance between killer and victim, strangulation forces the attacker to confront their victim's suffering directly. It can take 3 to 5 minutes of sustained pressure to end a life. That means Dennis had not just one chance, but dozens of chances to stop. He could have let go. He could have chosen a different path. But he didn't. Imagine Pamela in those final moments. Her hands clawing at his arms, her legs kicking in panic, the sheer terror in her eyes as oxygen slipped away. Imagine the sound of her choking, the desperate gasps for air, the muffled pleas that would never fully leave her lips. Pamela, faint, struggling, please. Dennis, stop. But Dennis did not stop. He pressed harder, determined, as if silencing her forever was the only way to regain control. And then, silence. When he finally loosened his grip, Pamela was no longer moving. Her chest didn't rise. Her lips turned blue, her skin pale with patches of purple. Dennis would later admit to police that she had been unresponsive for over 10 minutes by the time he called 911. The irony, the cruel irony, is that only after realizing what he had done did Dennis try to save her. He attempted CPR. He dialed 911. His voice trembled as he confessed. Dennis, on the 911 call, I did something terrible. I don't think she's alive. But it was far too late. Pamela Green had warned her daughter. She had given the world a clue. But the help she needed never arrived in time. And that's the tragedy of so many cases like this. The warning signs are there, often loud and clear, but they are ignored, overlooked, or simply come too late. For Dennis Edgecomb, the breaking point was the moment he decided control was worth more than compassion. And for Pamela, it was the moment her worst fears were realized. What began as another morning in a quiet town had now become the darkest day Morrill had seen in years. Part 3, The Night of Terror and the Forensic Truth. The evening of July 20th, 2010, began like many others for Pamela Green. She was at home in her small residence in Topsham, Maine. Neighbors later said they saw her around earlier that afternoon, cheerful but slightly tense, as though something was weighing on her mind. And indeed, it was. Her volatile relationship with Dennis Edgecomb had been spiraling out of control for months. Inside that house, the atmosphere was suffocating. Pamela's teenage daughter wasn't home that night, but she was still in constant contact with her mother through text messages. What Pamela sent her daughter was both chilling and heartbreaking. He's threatening to kill me right now. Call and you can hear it. Those were the last words Pamela ever sent. A desperate cry for help. Dennis Edgecomb arrived at Pamela's house in a state of fury. Friends described him as possessive, prone to jealousy, and unable to handle rejection. That night, it all exploded. Pamela, sensing the danger, tried to calm him down. But Dennis wasn't in the mood for reasoning. His anger had crossed into violence. At some point, the argument escalated into physical assault. In a chilling twist of fate, Pamela had left her phone line open, so when her daughter called 911, the operator could actually hear the struggle in real time. Screams. Threats. And finally, silence. Investigators would later confirm that Pamela had been strangled to death. The cause of death, manual strangulation. That meant Dennis had literally taken her life with his bare hands. It was intimate, violent, and deliberate. At 8:34 p.m., a man called 911. It was Dennis. His voice was trembling, yet strangely flat. "Dennis, I did something bad. I don't think she's alive." "Dispatcher, sir, what do you mean? What happened?" "Dennis, I killed her." Those words sealed his fate. He didn't run. He didn't hide. It was as though, after the storm of rage, he collapsed into an empty confession. When officers arrived at Pamela's home, the scene was harrowing. Pamela's lifeless body was found in the bedroom. There were clear signs of a violent struggle: furniture overturned, sheets twisted, bruises visible across her arms and neck. The look on her face, frozen in terror, told the story of her final moments. While Dennis's confession was already powerful, prosecutors knew that a solid conviction required forensic evidence. And the evidence told the story with brutal clarity. Bruising around the neck, the medical examiner confirmed the presence of deep bruises consistent with manual strangulation. The pressure applied was sustained and intentional. There was no possibility of this being an accident. Defensive wounds: Pamela had abrasions on her arms and hands. She had fought back, desperately trying to free herself from Dennis's grip. Time of death: forensic analysis confirmed Pamela's death aligned almost exactly with the 911 call and the text message she had sent her daughter. The timeline was airtight. Phone records: perhaps the most damning piece of evidence was the phone call itself. The audio recording captured portions of the struggle. Jurors would later hear Pamela's muffled screams and Dennis's angry voice in the background. It was like a haunting echo from beyond the grave, Pamela herself testifying against her killer. In cases of domestic homicide, defendants often try to argue it was an accident, a moment of passion gone too far. And indeed, Dennis would later claim he didn't mean to kill her. But the forensic evidence shredded that defense. Strangulation is not instantaneous, it requires minutes of sustained pressure. In other words, Dennis had several opportunities to stop, but he didn't. This wasn't a tragic accident. It was murder. And when the jury eventually heard both the 911 tapes and saw the physical evidence, the truth became undeniable: Pamela had predicted her own death, and Dennis had carried it out exactly as she feared. Part 4, The Trial, Truth on Trial. The courthouse in Alfred, Maine, was packed. Reporters lined the hallways, community members filled every bench, and whispers buzzed in the air like static. Everyone wanted to see the man who had shocked their quiet town with an act of brutal violence. When Dennis Edgecomb entered, escorted by deputies, he looked nothing like the monster painted in headlines. His head was bowed, his hands cuffed, his face pale and drained. Some people even whispered that he looked more like a broken man than a cold-blooded killer. But appearances can be deceiving. The district attorney wasted no time in building the picture. Standing tall before the jury, the prosecutor's opening statement echoed like a hammer. This is not a case of self-defense. This is a case of control, of rage, of a man who could not accept that Pamela Green had the courage to stand up to him. And for that, he silenced her forever. The prosecution unfolded its arsenal of evidence piece by piece, each item meticulously linked together like a chain tightening around Dennis's neck. Pamela's final texts: the jury saw the messages Pamela sent her daughter just minutes before she was killed. "He's threatening to kill me." The words glowed on the screen, as though Pamela herself had come back to testify. Jurors shifted uncomfortably in their seats. The blood evidence, forensic experts described in clinical, almost cold detail how blood patterns at the scene didn't match Dennis's version of events. This wasn't a quick accident or a struggle gone wrong, the evidence showed force, multiple blows, and an intentional act. The 911 call, played in court, Dennis's own voice filled the room. Trembling, uneven, but damning. "I don't think she's alive." It wasn't the cry of a man surprised by tragedy. It sounded, the prosecutor argued, like a man realizing what he had done. History of control. Friends and family testified to Dennis's possessive behavior, how Pamela had tried to leave him before, how she feared him but was entangled by his constant presence. Every word built the narrative. Pamela Green wasn't just killed, she was trapped in a relationship where the warning signs had been flashing red for years. But Dennis wasn't about to let the prosecution's story stand unchallenged. His defense attorney rose, calm but commanding, and painted a very different picture. "This case is about a man pushed to his breaking point. Dennis Edgecomb is not a cold-blooded killer. He is a flawed, troubled man caught in a storm of arguments, drugs, and emotional turmoil. What happened was not premeditated, it was a tragic accident." The defense leaned heavily on 2 points. Drug-induced chaos. They highlighted Dennis's cocaine use that night. Witnesses described how Dennis had been wired, paranoid, and unstable. His lawyer argued that cocaine impaired his judgment, clouded his perception, and turned a heated argument into something deadly. "Ladies and gentlemen," the defense attorney pleaded, "this was not murder with intent. This was the chaos of addiction, the fog of drugs, the madness of a man spiraling out of control. A relationship of turmoil." The defense acknowledged the fights, the volatility, the arguments, but tried to frame it as mutual. They suggested Pamela wasn't just a victim, but part of a relationship where both sides hurled hurtful words and threats. They presented Dennis as remorseful, someone who called 911 immediately after realizing what he had done, a man horrified at the consequences of his actions. The courtroom became a battlefield of words. Each side struck blows. When the prosecution pressed forensic experts about the severity of Pamela's injuries, jurors could almost feel the weight of the hammer that had struck her. When the defense questioned witnesses about Dennis's paranoia and drug use, the image of a man unraveling came into sharper focus. The most powerful moment came when Pamela's daughter took the stand. Through tears, she read aloud her mother's final message: "He's threatening to kill me right now, call and you can hear it." The entire courtroom went silent. Even Dennis lowered his head, unable to meet her eyes. By the end of the trial, the jury was left with 2 competing portraits. Was Dennis a calculating abuser who finally carried out his threat? Or was he a broken man, under the influence of drugs, who lost control in a heated moment? The prosecution wanted murder in the highest degree. The defense begged for manslaughter. The jury had to decide, was Pamela's death inevitable because of who Dennis was? Or was it a tragic collision of drugs, rage, and bad decisions? And as the trial drew to a close, tension hung in the air. Reporters whispered predictions, family members held hands in the gallery, and Dennis sat motionless, knowing that his future, perhaps even his life, would be decided by 12 strangers. Part 5, The Aftermath, Justice, Regret, and the Lessons We Cannot Ignore. When the jury's decision came down, guilty of murder, a heavy silence filled the courtroom. Dennis Edgecomb, once just another neighbor in a small Maine community, was now branded for life as a killer. For Pamela Green's family, the verdict brought some measure of relief, but it could never truly heal the hole that had been ripped open on that July night. Pamela's daughter, who had received that final text message, testified in tears about how she lives every day with her mother's last words echoing in her head. "He's threatening to kill me right now." She said, "I tried to call, but it was already too late. I will carry that guilt forever, even though I know it wasn't my fault." The courtroom was thick with emotion. The judge, before handing down Edgecombe's sentence, made a point to look him in the eyes. He said, "Mr. Edgecomb, you had countless chances to walk away, to seek help, to choose life over death. Instead, you chose violence. And in that choice, you not only took a woman's life, but you destroyed your own, and shattered the lives of her children and her family." Dennis Edgecomb was sentenced to 37 years in prison. For a man already in his late 40s, that was essentially a life sentence. He would be an old man before he ever tasted freedom again, if he lived that long. But beyond the sentence, what lingered most were the unanswered questions. Why didn't anyone act more forcefully when Pamela had been crying out for help? Why didn't the justice system intervene earlier, when the signs of abuse were so clear? Pamela's story became a rallying cry in Maine for stronger domestic violence protections. Advocates argued that the system failed her, because the text message she sent was essentially a plea for help in real time, and yet nothing stopped the inevitable. In the months after her death, community groups held candlelight vigils, not just to mourn Pamela, but to demand change. Neighbors who once thought Dennis was just a quiet guy now admitted there had been troubling signs. A friend of Pamela said, "She told me more than once that she was afraid of him. But I never thought he'd actually kill her. I wish I had pushed harder, called someone, done something." The tragedy exposed how often domestic violence hides in plain sight, masked by denial, silence, or fear of speaking out. And that silence can be deadly. Inside prison walls, Dennis Edgecomb reportedly struggled to accept responsibility. During interviews with correctional staff, he vacillated between sorrow and self-pity. At times, he admitted that he'd lost control and regretted what he had done. But at other times, he insisted that Pamela provoked him and drove him to it. That unwillingness to take full accountability only deepened the anger of Pamela's family. For Pamela's children, the trial may have brought legal closure, but it couldn't erase the trauma. Every holiday, every birthday, was marked by the absence of their mother. They clung to the memory of her warmth, her humor, and her fierce love, while struggling with the reality that she was taken from them in such a brutal way. And so, the Edgecomb case stands as a stark reminder: abuse doesn't begin with murder. It begins with control, with intimidation, with small threats that escalate over time. And too often, people dismiss those red flags until it's too late. Pamela Green's death forced the community to confront this truth head-on. Ignoring warning signs can be fatal. The case may be closed in a legal sense, but the questions it raises, about love, fear, silence, and survival, will never be fully resolved. The story of Dennis Edgecomb and Pamela Green is more than just another line in the criminal records of Maine. It is the story of how love can sour into obsession, how fear can grow in the shadows, and how silence can kill just as surely as a weapon. Pamela saw the danger coming. Her last message was proof. She cried out for help, but the system, her friends, and even fate itself could not stop the tragedy that unfolded in those final, terrible minutes of her life. Dennis Edgecomb sits behind prison walls, serving out his years, stripped of freedom but never stripped of the reality that he is the man who destroyed not only one life but many. Pamela's children, her family, and her community continue to bear scars that time cannot heal. But beyond the crime and the courtroom, this case leaves us with something heavier, something we cannot turn away from. How many more people like Pamela are crying out for help tonight, and how many of them will be heard in time? It is a question that cuts deep, because the answer is one that lies not in courtrooms or headlines, but in us, in whether we choose to notice, to speak up, to act before silence turns into tragedy. So, as we close this story, remember, violence doesn't begin with the act of murder. It begins with control, with threats, with fear. And if we truly want justice for victims like Pamela Green, we must learn to recognize the storm before it breaks. Thank you for watching, and if you believe these stories matter, don't forget to share them. Every share, every voice, might just save someone else from meeting the same fate.